Hey everybody, welcome to the Renaissance Woodworker Shop Update for September 29th, 2016. Here's what's been going on in my shop this week. I've been swatting flies. That's right, I'm making a fly swatter. I was really irritated with the fly the other day at the lumber yard, and one of my colleagues and I started joking about how we should make handcrafted fly swatters, and the whole idea of artisanal products came up, and before I knew it, I was designing a fly swatter in my head. Well, here it is. I just pulled it out of the veneer press. The head is comprised of 3 layers of veneer. They're cross-banded for a little bit extra strength, and it's made out of walnut and maple. I have riven out a piece of hickory for the handle, shaved it down to a nice flexible piece here so you get the little whippy part of it, which is really nice. And I'm gonna go ahead and finish this up and do a little bit of fretwork here on the, what would you call this part? The swatting part. So yeah, it's kind of a silly project, but you know, at the same time, I've been talking a lot about veneer lately and doing banding and inlay. So I started working a little bit with veneer, got to pull out my shave pony to do the draw knife work on this whole thing. It's actually been kind of a fun project, drawing on a bunch of different skills. And in the process of doing some of the sizing and the veneer work and everything for this, I came up with a couple jigs that I think are gonna help me in my future forays into stringing and inlay banding. And I wanted to show you one that I made. This is my veneer cutting board, if you will. Here are a couple of pieces of veneer that I was working on for that fly swatter. And I wanted something that I could cut against, almost like a bench hook of sorts. So I took the traditional bench hook construction, and you can see I've put a cleat on the underside of this piece of plywood so that it comes and it references right up against my bench top. I could come in with a hold fast and secure everything down if I want, but I've then taken this other piece of plywood and set it on top. And I've put a couple of just brass hinges I had floating around, cheap brass hinges, so that this actually hinges up. And I can take veneer and I can drop it in there, and it acts as a press to hold it in place. This edge is straight, and I can come in with a veneer saw and cut out perfect straight edges. I can flip it long grain wise. I can use a knife to cut it to width or whatever, cutting it with the grain or across the grain with a saw. I think it works out great. I was able to, precisely dimension pieces of veneer to the exact same size. I've also found that it works out great as a shooting board. So if I need to joint edges and true up edges, I can just run a block plane or any kind of plane here and true up those edges, both in grain and along the edge grain, which is really nice. And I think what I'm probably gonna do is add a small stop kind of further out here that is definitely square to this edge, so it can really work like a shooting board. I can get nice square edges. Maybe that's gonna be necessary, maybe not. So whatever I do, I'll probably just make it temporary, just kind of playing around with it. But the biggest thing right now is being able to kind of stack multiple veneers together and sandwich them in place and be able to get consistent edges that all match up in that whole stack. That was really nice. So that's just kind of step one of my veneer bench hook. I'm sure I'll be making modifications to this in the future as I come up with ideas, as I run into projects where I need a very specific type of cut, like maybe I'm doing parquetry work, I need specific angles or whatever. But I like this as a base foundation, a nice wide work surface. I can remove this side piece, this top piece if I want, or maybe slim it up. But it's definitely a step in the right direction as I begin to work with more veneer, and I'm kind of excited about it. So the video on this fly swatter should be out in a couple of days. Obviously, I've got to finish up the work, and I'm hoping to do that maybe a little bit tonight. Realistically speaking, this video may not be out until the weekend or early next week. Now, speaking of that, I'm also working on editing together the sessions from Woodworking in America, and you should be seeing those in the next week as well. The key thing that I want you to remember is if you subscribe to my email list, you're going to get an update every Friday of every bit of content that I put out. So if you're really looking forward to one of those classes or the fly swatter build or any builds that I come up with, subscribing to the email list and getting that Friday email is probably the best way to keep up with it all. But now I've got a question for you guys. I've got a little bit of a problem with one of the tools in my shop, and I wanted to get your advice on it. If you didn't already know this, hand tool shops, they still produce dust. In fact, quite a bit of it. And an air cleaner like this jet air cleaner can really be a lifesaver when it comes to just circulating the air and sucking up the fine stuff. I've had this jet air cleaner for 8, 9 years maybe, and it's always done a really good job. But recently it's been giving me problems. The remote has basically stopped working altogether, and that's not a huge deal. I replaced the batteries and it just doesn't really work. But here's the thing, I can turn this on, and first of all, it is really, really slow coming up to speed on low, and it doesn't really blow very much at all. But the other thing I found is the minute that I try to turn on the timer, it shuts itself off. If I don't turn on the timer and just let it run, invariably it will shut itself off automatically within 5 to 10 minutes. Here's the other thing. If I try to turn up the speed, the minute I hit the speed button, it shuts itself off. If I turn it back on and try to quickly advance the speed up to high, it shuts itself off. If I try to get it moving any faster than it is, it shuts itself off. Now, I've gone in here with some compressed air and kind of blown things out. I've replaced the internal filter, I've replaced the external filter, so I don't think it's a shorting out issue. The little fuse switch here is perfectly fine. There may be some problems with the electronics themselves, and I have not taken it apart to kind of mess around with that, but honestly, I'm an idiot when it comes to electronics, so I'm a little hesitant to do too much there. So I defer to people who know what they're talking about when it comes to electronics, or maybe some of you have had this problem. It could just be that this is old and it's run its course, but I hate to get rid of it because, well, they're expensive. It's also really heavy. And trying to get this off the wall might be a little difficult. So anybody have any ideas why it won't turn on, why it won't go any faster, why it's shutting itself off? Because I haven't been using it lately and the dust is really building up in here. You don't notice how much this cleans the stuff out of the air until you're not using it on a regular basis. One of the great things about this is being able to turn it on, set the timer, and leave the shop. And when I come back to the shop the next day, the air is nice and clean. I don't have dust settling on every horizontal surface. So it's really a vital element of my shop. And if I can't get it working, I'm gonna have to replace it. But I really would love to hear if anybody has any suggestions on something I can try, or maybe you've experienced this and know of a fix that would work. If that matter, if you have questions for me, feel free to drop me a line through my website or send me an email, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have about hand tools or woodworking or fly fishing, digital marketing, what's the best way to achieve formant frequency and be heard over a symphonic orchestra. Yeah, any of those will work. And if I can, just one last plug. Again, I'm giving away 2 bad axe saws, a bayonet and a stiletto dovetail saw, as well as a pair of bad axe bench hooks. And that's going out to any and all hand tool school apprentices. So you have until the end of the day, September 30th, that's just a couple days, to sign up for apprenticeship. Anybody who signed up will have their name thrown into a hat to win one of those saws or a bench hook. So that's all for me, folks. I'm gonna get back to work on this fly swatter, do a little bit more shaping of this handle, and hopefully get to some fret work a little bit later tonight. We'll see you next time.